Welcome to those of you that are just come in. We're just hanging on a little bit before we start. Okay, it's now 2 minutes past 10. Got about 17 people online now, so I think so. Let's start. Thank you, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Maybe if somebody else can just confirm. Quinn, can you hear me? Just checking.
Yes, I can. Yep.
Okay, good. Thanks a lot. For those of you that have joined this annual engagement, in the past we've done it quite a few times before. You will know more or less the format. We stick to quite an informal program and discussion. This time is very much dedicated to our private sector and public sector users, and we do distinguish these users from our typical academic users because the needs and priorities are different, and we like to focus our attention on the needs of this sector of users. So for those of you that are new for the first time, welcome. We really would like to have new people on board, and also we always try to get this invite distributed further so that people that maybe have never heard about the opportunities of CHPC also get that opportunity. So thank you for joining. As I indicated already, we will be recording this session because in trying to schedule this, we found it quite difficult to find a time that will suit, well, probably never everybody, but most people. So there are some that cannot join that would have liked to join. So thank you, Charles, for making all these arrangements and doing the interactions. I appreciate. Okay, so let me just quickly share my screen. I just want to just share what we will be doing today. Let me just get to the sharing now again. Just go to my slides. Can you see that full screen slide? Charles, can you maybe just confirm?
I'm seeing it at this stage in presenters mode. Let me just check.
And now?
Yeah, that's right. That's perfect.
Okay, perfect. Then this is it up. So this is just the first slide. So as an introduction, I just want to show the agenda for today. Now, you will see that Charles did communicate times, and of course we would like to stick to times, but I say more or less. This is an informal session. We want to encourage you to discuss, and if we present on something and you want to put up your hand, we will try and check it so that we can attend to questions and so on. But this is briefly what we're going to do. I'm busy with this introduction, but I would like just to spend a little bit of time for all the attendees to just quickly introduce yourself, to say where you're from, and so that we know who is online. And then we will have a user presentation. Stefanie, I put you up first. Stefanie indicated that she can only join us until 10:45 today, so I put you first. We really like to hear from your side. And after you have presented, I will do a bit of an overview on what's been happening at CHPC and what the current status is in terms of supporting this specific user base, about 20 minutes or so. And then we have 3 more user presentations from Mintech, Erythrim, and eScience. And we appreciate the willingness from the colleagues to contribute to the program in this way. We realize that for these virtual sessions, it's sometimes you want to just take a break and maybe make a cup of tea, and that's why we've got a break. But we'll see when we get to that stage what the sentiments are. But at that stage of the program, we would very much like to have an open discussion already, or to have an open discussion, maybe following up from discussions that's already coming from the previous parts of the agenda. So I trust this is okay with everybody. So let's maybe start just introducing some attendees. If possible, you can maybe just switch on your mic for a moment. I'm just going to go down the list that I have here. Charles Maria from Kushi, maybe you can start just who you are, who you represent.
Yes, sure. No problem. Yeah, so I'm just from Koshi Consult. We're doing quite a few things in our company. We do digital engineering and computer aided engineering things as well, and general engineering consulting work. Yeah, and I mostly just use the CHPC just for our CFD and FEA requirements that we have. Yeah, and we're very happy to use them as well.
Thank you very much, Charles. Next is Christian Rutham.
Yes, morning everybody. Thanks, Werner. I'm Christian de Wet from Erison, and we do resell the advanced CFD software called SimCenter Star Sim Plus. But I'm not going to give too much away because I'm also going to present later. But yeah.
Thank you, Christian. Ivan, you can introduce yourself. Ivan, I cannot hear you if you are talking. I'm not sure if there's maybe a sound problem.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
I think it was just on a different mic there. Hi, morning everyone. I'm Evan from Qfinsoft. We're the distributors for ANSYS software, as well as Rocky. And yeah, we had a long partnership with the CHPC, obviously offering licenses and that for users with ANSYS. Also, sometimes we do make use of their services for our own consulting work as well. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ivan. Gerard Botha.
Good morning, thank you. I'm Gerard Botha. I'm from C4 Eco Solutions. We're an environmental company. We do a lot of climate analysis, and we're looking specifically also to do some remote sensing classifications on GPU clusters. And that's one of the reasons for me joining these meetings. Thanks.
You're most welcome, Gerard. So thanks for joining. Kenneth Allen from Greenplan. Kenny.
Good morning. Greenplan, we do energy modeling and building modeling, and over the past few years we've done quite a few wind studies, and that's where we've made contact with the CHPC and had, I think, quite a few years now with Charles and Werner.
Thank you very much, Kenny. Next I have Krzyzewska Francis.
Hi, I'm Krzyzewska Francis. I'm from the South African Medical Research Council, and
sorry, Krzyzewska. Yeah, you're breaking up a bit. Maybe I hope it's not my connection. Yeah. No, you are unfortunately breaking up a bit, but we did get your affiliation from South African Medical Research Council. So thank you very much, Krzyzewska. Next up, Larisha Rothman.
Hi. Sorry. Hi, I'm Larisha. I'm from Sengen, Central Genetics, and we work on crop genomics, so specifically to improve the breeding programs. And so we do a lot of bioinformatics work. We're using the CHPC through diplomics in association with the CPGR. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Larisha, for that introduction. Louis Lefrancy. Louis, are you there? Not hearing. I see Louis is online, but I'm not hearing him. Louis is, of course, from.
Yes, hello.
Yes, Louis. Now I hear you.
I'm very fine, thanks, Werner. Yes, sorry, I've tuned in a little late. I guess this is an introduction. I'm Louis Lagrange from Northwest University, and I work in computational fluid dynamics.
Yes, so maybe just to put in perspective to everybody, Louis is already, though he's from Northwest University, has a commercial program for commercial work that he's been doing. So that is why he is part of this meeting. So we could discuss that model of working also with the others today. Thanks, Louis.
Thank you, Werner.
Mopeli Kama.
Morning, everyone. I'm from Mintech Pyrometallurgy Division. I'm working on CFD modeling of reacting flow solvers using hydrogen as a reductant, and I work with Queen. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mopeli, for joining. Next up, Quinn.
Hi, everyone. I'm Quinn Reynolds from Mintech. I work with Mopedi, as you just said. We're one of the government science councils like CSIR and Medical Research Council. We basically do research for industrial research for the minerals beneficiation industry in South Africa. So we're both from the pyrometallurgy division, and yeah, our interest is really in computational and numerical modeling of high temperature processes that go on inside minerals processing furnaces. So all sorts of interesting physics and chemistry, and I think we've been using CHPC for a very, very long time to help us. Thanks.
Indeed. Thanks, Quinn. I know you've been traveling back from the US, so I'm glad you're not feeling too sleepy to join us. Thanks. And next, I have Stefan Schmidt.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm Stefan Schmidt from QFinsoft. Together with ANSYS, with Evan, we support the ANSYS clients in South Africa. And obviously, as he mentioned, CHPC has quite a few ANSYS licenses available for clients, yes, and also academic.
Of course, yes. Thank you very much, Stefan, for joining us. Stefanie Landman.
Yes, good morning. I'm Stephanie. I work for the South African Weather Service. We are a parastatal organization, and our mandate is for the issuing of warnings of severe weather that might have severe impact on life or property. We've been using the CHPC for a number of years now as our failover or backup system if our in-house HPC fails.
Yes, thank you very much, Stephanie, for joining us. We of course take note of your time constraints, so we will give you more time to speak just now. Zahid Ibrahim.
Morning all, Zaid Ibrahim representing eScience Associates. We're an environmental consultancy company, and my main role is air dispersion modeling, mainly focusing on air quality and dispersion of atmospheric emissions.
Thank you, Zaid. Appreciate it. So I've looked at all the, I hope, external people that joined us. If anybody that I've missed that's not from, say, CHPC, please just indicate. I hope I've not missed everybody. I trust you will agree that we have quite a good representative audience, actually representing many different domains. I quickly want to just also make sure that we introduce the CHPC representatives that's also online. Maybe starting off with Charles. You probably should all know Charles through the organizing of this. Thanks, Charles.
Good morning. Thanks, Werner. As people know, I'm the science support engineer here at the CHPC, and I've been working with most of the, especially the commercial users over the years. Eric Mbele has also asked me to introduce him because he doesn't have sound. He's a senior systems administrator at the CHPC.
Thank you, Charles. Benjamin? Benjamin, can you hear me? It seems Benjamin is maybe just bogged down. Benjamin is a software developer at the CHPC, so he is also will also be online a bit. Yes, thanks for introducing Eric. Charles, we just see who else we have. Mteto Suvaga.
Good morning, colleagues. I trust everybody's doing well. My name is Mteto Suvaga. I'm a research support scientist in the fields of Earth system science and astronomy at the CHPC. Thank you.
Thank you, Mteto. And then we also have Nomlindelo Mfupi, but normally I think you say your speakers are are not working, or your sound may not be working. I'm just checking. Just give me a heads up, but normally Mfupi is support scientist specifically for bioinformatics users at CHPC. So we also have a key private sector users from the bioinformatics area, but also on the public sector side, South African Medical Research Council, for example. So normally is a support scientist for them. Thanks normally for joining. I'm sure you can hear us. And then I think lastly, I've got Sam Mateka.
Hi, morning everybody. My name is Sam Mateka. I'm a support scientist in the field of computational mechanics.
Thank you very much, Sam. I think I've got everybody now. So you know who the audience are. I thank you again for joining. And I think we're going to jump right into the agenda as indicated. So Stephanie, I'm going to give you an opportunity just to provide some background on South African Weather Service and CHPC collaborations and your experiences. Thank you very much, Stephanie.
Yes, thank you, Werner, and I'm sorry for the lack of time. Yeah, as I said, I work for the South African Weather Service, and we run our numerical weather prediction models in-house on our own HPC. Unfortunately, public funding, we don't have the money to have a second backup system. So we have a memorandum of understanding with the CHPC that if our systems do fail, then we run our NWP or our numerical weather prediction models on their system, because it is a necessity for the public weather forecasters to issue forecasts and to keep an eye on expected weather, especially during severe weather events. Luckily, we had the CHPC because on the 31st of December, New Year's Eve, our HPC failed with quite significant issues. So the night of New Year's Eve, so we've switched over to the CHPC, where our models actually ran for the following 7 weeks, which was a good thing because I don't know if everyone remembers, January was full of severe events and significant rainfall. So at least the forecasters had access to the NWP or the forecast information to them. So in the beginning, when we need to, on the 31st of December, when we failed over, we realized that previously when the CHPC had a luster failure, we did not check all our systems as we should have, and some of our dependencies got corrupted, and we needed to reinstall and rebuild and implement new systems to actually get our system running again, which took us about 10 days, during which the CHPC personnel were really invaluable. They assisted us any time of the day, weekends. It was quite incredible. So it took us about 10 days to get the system really up and running regularly. And it took us another week or so just to get all the post-processing running and get everything correct, that the forecast and the information was disseminated to stakeholders as well as to our head office back here in Pretoria. Yeah, so we had to run the system 3 times a day. We required 72 nodes. I think I've reported on this in previous meetings, is we do have a unique user that if we submit something, it will actually start killing off, throwing off processes until there's enough resources available. And we appreciate the fact that we did annoy a lot of CHPC users, unfortunately, because every 6 and 12 hours, we had to submit our NWP systems. And we know that we had to, unfortunately, interrupt processes from other users. But as I said, without the CHPC, the weather service would have really been in a jam. We wouldn't have any outlook for the next 3 or 4 days. So it was an invaluable resource to have, and we hope to have it in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Indeed, I can confirm that from a CHPC perspective, the support of the South African Weather Service is seen as a critical role to fulfill. As Stephanie has explained, it's all about failover. I think maybe just for more broader understanding, when it comes to the CHPC, the primary focus of CHPC is to be a research facility. So it is to stimulate research where innovation is needed to develop things. It's not necessarily an operational facility. So typically what SOURCE requires is operational runs to be done, and that is why they have their own in-house system. But in those events where things go wrong, I think all of us would agree that this is a critical service and that is delivered to the country. So the CHPC is feel quite privileged to be in the position to support in this way. So Stephanie, I know this was a very unprecedented, I must say unprecedented, because when we support South African Weather Service, I mean, we've done this for many years and we've had this commitment for many years, but this was the first time that you needed the services for this long period. And it was a real test for CHPC, but we are glad that we could deliver on it. So, yeah, so I trust that your systems are now up and running. Can you maybe just comment on the current status of your systems, Stefan?
Yes, it is up and running, or let's say it's up and walking. As you know, the system is past its lifespan. We have last week the new tender went out, so we are in the process of replacing the system. HPCs generally have a lifespan of about 5 years. We're pushing now to 8. So it is really past its life cycle. As you know, with the Luster system, these storage systems also start to failure after a while. And that's exactly what failed on the 31st. It was a significant failure on the disks. Why it took so long actually is because the system is quite old. We do not have the parts in South Africa anymore, so we had to get it from the US. That took a while because of the timing of the year. There was some misunderstandings between the supplier but it eventually came. But we are warned by the vendor that we are working on borrowed time on the system. Since then, we did have 2 not failures, but the system went down twice again. Luckily, it was solved within a 3 to 6 hour period, which we can handle. But yeah, it is on its knees. So I can't promise that we won't use you in the following year or so until our new system is implemented. But it's running, it's there. We're back on operations, but we're just crossing our fingers every morning.
Thanks for that update. And yeah, be assured, I mean, the CHPC will be ready to support. But I think she is touching on an important point that is also of relevance to CHPC on how the age of systems requires more inputs and attention and time to be spent. And we are experiencing this in the CHPC side as well. So we will talk about this a bit later. But maybe just to end off on this discussion of SOURCE, Charles, I do want to give you just an opportunity to want to make a few comments on just what it takes to do the support to SOURCE. You have been the person directly doing this and supporting the unified model installations at CHPC. Maybe just a few comments from your side.
I can't really make any comments in the public forum about this. I don't really want people knowing what I say when this happens, but the process in principle is reasonably mature. We've been around this piece of software for a long time, but it is a uniquely complex stack of software, and it involves downloading data at a critical time and then launching a whole bunch of things automatically. So it's quite a big stack of things that need to work together. And as with any stack like that, it's quite easy to trip it up. And there's a lot of dependencies. So really, when push comes to shove, we do what we can to get things going as quickly as we can. But I think the lesson what we've always learned with this, and certainly we relearned it this time again, is the need to do the kind of testing when things are calm, so that one can just hit the button when things are not calm and know that things will work. So yeah, it's all about preparation up front, and then when push comes to shove, just getting things fixed as soon as we can.
Thank you, Charles. So yeah, so this is the reality for CHPC and Source, and we are continuing this commitment. So Stephanie, I can also just confirm we are busy finalizing the signing of the new MOA. So this is definitely on the cards. Thank you. I think I just wanted to give Stephanie this opportunity. Stephanie, I hope you can stay on for a bit longer, but when you have to leave, we will, of course, understand. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
So I'm going to move then to just a presentation from my side, especially, I mean, some of the people that's been with CHPC for a few years will recognize this. I updated it a bit, but it's the same kind of information that we typically share in these sessions every year. Just get my slides up again. I'm never quite sure. Charles, is it showing full screen now again?
Yes, I've got full screen.
Okay, so this is, as I mentioned, for people that seen it before, you will see some things again, but especially for people that's joining for the first time, I just want to take about 15 minutes, maybe a little bit more, just to introduce what we are doing at CHPC and specifically then focusing on the public and private sector users. So maybe just to take a bit of a step back and say, well, what is the CHPC all about? So it is a national high-performance computing facility, and it is directly funded by the South African government through Department of Science and Innovation. So it is a public facility. It's already paid for, and typically you get access as a public entity user, also from academia, without having to pay for this. But it is very much also available to the private sector. Now, we are hosted through an entity that is called the National Integrated Cyber Infrastructure System. So it is quite a mouthful, but we refer to it in short as NICIS. And you will also see it in the logo of the CHPC, is that NICIS is quite prominently displayed. And I'm going to, in the next slide, just say a little bit more about this. But ultimately, NICIS is hosted and administered by the CSIR. So this is a CSIR unit, and that is also why we are based in the CSIR campus in Cape Town. The CHPC already started operations in June 2007. So you can see it is going for, the years are adding on. I mean, we're going, 16, 17 years now already. And during this period, I would like to believe we have built up quite good experience in how to host these facilities quite properly. Until recently, the CHPC hosted the largest HPC system in Africa. And I'm just say until recently because there is now a faster system in Morocco, but it's only temporary before we will take the lead again, I believe. But I think it puts in context where we position ourselves in terms of the continent. We have about 35 employees, and it is divided into 3 different divisions, the research, technical, and operational divisions. So I forgot to introduce myself. For those that do not know me, I am the research manager of the CHPC. So my role and responsibility is all about the research division at CHPC, looking after the users and making sure that the users are supported properly. But we also have a dedicated technical team. Eric is here from the technical team that supports our systems very efficiently and making sure that it's always available and running. And we also have an operational division that looks at all other matters. So you can see that is a structure that works quite well for us. Just taking one step back into what this NICIS is, and I want to highlight that what the DSI is funding as a public entity consists of 3 legs. The one is the computing services, and this is what we know as the Center for High Performance Computing. But part of the focus is the other 2 legs, and this is the networking services, South African Research Network, making sure that high bandwidth connectivity amongst all academic and public institutions are in place and always continuously upgraded. So there should be no issue for large data transfers amongst any of these entities, but they also do a number of other services. And then we also have the data services, the RESA, Data Intensive Research Initiative of South Africa, looking after all the data and storage requirements of the users. And this is not only for CHPC, this is for NICIS. So there's many other people that also, entities also needing data management services or data analyses that may not necessarily need the CHPC compute, but most certainly it is also a service that CHPC users can benefit from, and I will say a bit more about it later. The point I just want to make is that from the vision from the DSI, it is important to recognize that it's not only funding the CHPC. It's not because if you only have one of these three legs, you cannot really do proper research. If you have a fast computer, but you cannot get your data to and from, then it's a problem. So please keep in mind, NICIS is the entity that's doing the services. So coming back to CHPC, what is our mandate? And I think we always emphasize this research enabler role. I already mentioned earlier that it's very much a research facility, but we are not focused on doing our own research. Maybe a little bit of this does happen, but certainly not the main focus. It's all about getting others to be enabled to do their research. And we do this by providing or provisioning of the computational resources to, well, if you read the three bullets below, it's basically everybody. I mean, the South African academic research community is probably the bulk of this because this is where most research happens. We also have dedicated agreements to also expand our service provisioning in many different ways to African, the so-called Square Kilometre Array or SKA countries. It's 8 dedicated countries, but the whole SADC partner countries region as well. And they have similar access to the CHPC than researchers in South Africa. So you can see it expands well beyond the borders of South Africa. And we also have dedicated programs to facilitate the commissioning and take-up of HPC resources in those countries as well. But that last bullet, the third one, is what it is about today. It's a focus on the public and private sector users in South Africa, because very much we do provide these resources, and some of the people that will present today will also then talk about their experiences. So this research enabling role, I think, is a cascade of 4 things. I mean, the most basic thing we do is to give you access to HPC hardware infrastructure, well-maintained, state-of-the-art, although it might be aging a bit at this stage, but that is what we do. But mostly what we see typically for academic users, just giving somebody access is not enough. You need to support the code and the software, and how it is to be installed, how it is to be properly used on the system. So we do that. We dedicated employees at CHPC. We do research domain area support. So typically people that are forming part of the research group at CHPC are appointed according to the demand from users in the domain areas they represent. So if you have a certain bulk of users that say wants support in computational fluid dynamics or computational mechanics, that area, then we have dedicated people to support. And that same support goes to the public and private sector users. So we don't distinguish. We want to make sure that where the support is needed in the domain areas, we do this. Then maybe I just need to point out that we also have a very important mandate to do training and human capital development or education initiatives, specifically where it's focused on HPC. We see that we do have, in many cases, a relatively inexperienced user base, and we need to make sure to train people properly to use our systems. And this training is not restricted only to the academic sector. So people and representatives in this forum, that if you need some of this training, you can certainly approach the CHPC to assist. Okay, so that is the core of the mandate of the CHPC. Focus is on public and private sector users today. For those that are new, the system that we have, the HPC system, has been commissioned already in 2016, 2017, first and second phase. So it is relatively old. We are going for 6 years. So as Stephanie mentioned, we are also in a refresh mode or stage for the next generation HPC system. But this is what we still currently have. When it was launched, it was the first petascale system, not only in South Africa, but on the African continent, meaning that its total performance is more than 1,000 teraflops. It's positioned quite well on the top 500 list of supercomputers. And I always point out that if you think 121st or 127th is not that high on the list, I think it gets perspective when you realize that this is the only system on the African continent on the list. So that is why we see this as a pioneering piece of infrastructure for our region. It's not on the list anymore. I mean, you need to upgrade it every year. So hopefully our next system will be positioned on this list again. Just not going to spend a lot of time. These slides you can get afterwards, but you can also get this information from the links I will provide later. But just a short summary on the total number of nodes when it was installed. 1,368 total number of calls, just shy of 33,000 calls, 56 gigabits per second InfiniBand interconnect, of course, ensuring that this is a truly an HPC system where multiple nodes can be used for single jobs. And we also have a dedicated 4 petabyte storage system, scratch storage, fast parallel storage Lustre that makes sure that your data is well positioned to be optimally used on the system. Maybe all of you may not know this, but we also have other, say, compute resources. We also have a dedicated GPU cluster with 30 NVIDIA V100s. It's modest in size, but it is something that is quite heavily utilized by the user community. It's certainly also available to this community. So if you are interested in dedicated GPU resources, you can approach this CHPC. Mostly it is used for chemistry users at this stage, molecular dynamics type calculations, about half of this resource. The other half, very much machine learning models that are trained and so on. We also have a dedicated production cloud facility called Saboa. It has already been commissioned in March 2020. It's also modest in size. I mean, I do give some of the specs there, but what it is a cloud resource where users can be provisioned with resources as they require to set up their own processes and work that they want to do in a cloud environment. So if anybody is interested in exploring what this is, there's also a bit of a cost involved with this for private sector users, but please approach the CHPC to see what we can do for you if cloud is what you are looking for. It's very much part of the future plans of the CHPC and the whole of NICIS to expand our cloud offering. So this is not the only resource that we will have. Probably soon in the future we will have more. And this is why I want to just focus a bit on what the future looks like for the CHPC and also the broader NICIS. So the target is that our next generation system will be a 4 petaflop cluster. The procurement for this has been progressing quite far by now already. It's been in the last year or so, the procurement process was ongoing. And only about a week or so ago, we got final approval from the CSR board to proceed with this procurement. So we are into the stage where we now need to negotiate a bit with National Treasury and also the winning bidder that needs to be appointed. But certainly we are looking at the 2023-24 year, which starts on the 1st of April to get more clarity on when the system will come. But it's now not a case anymore of if it will happen, but it's more a case of when it will be implemented. We will also, associated with this, we will have a new Lustre file system that needs to be procured at the same time, and it will be delivered together with this cluster to make sure that it is optimally providing for the storage needs, the fast parallel file system that we need to operate the cluster. Then there's a few other things happening. We also, in our DERISA sister entity in NICIS, the Data Intensive Research Initiative of South Africa, there's also 8 petabytes we call IROT storage that is busy being deployed. The infrastructure has been procured some time ago, but it is a process to get it properly deployed. And this provides a second tier of storage for users that, say, have large data sets on our Lustre scratch storage, where they can transfer this data and where it is managed much more securely than maybe a Lustre system, where you can have proper backups of your system, whereas Lustre, we do not provide this. So this is something that is nearing the conclusion now in terms of deployment, and further announcements should soon be coming on how this can be used by CHPC users as well. On top of this, there's also a long-term archival storage, also by DERISA being procured. That procurement process is also very far progressed. It's more about getting the equipment on site and deploying it. This is a 20 petabyte tape system that will also be commissioned in 23-24. So you can see that from a CHPC user perspective, we can look forward to at least 3 tiers of storage, where you have your fast parallel storage in Lustre, where you have a slightly slower storage but more secure on the IROT's 8 petabyte storage, and then your slow but long-term archival type storage on tape, where you can leave data for much longer and maybe much more data than you need. I think this hierarchical storage management, or HSM system, is very much what needs to be closely associated with an HPC system and for users to optimally make use of the HPC. So we are very pleased about developments in this area, and all of this should be implemented in 23-24. So we will announce this. Other things to happen: expansion of the GPU resources. As I mentioned, we are overdue to renew on that as well. And 2023 is the same time that this will happen. I didn't put a bullet here, but also on our cloud resources, there is also some further expansion happening, even some equipment that has been bought already. So whereas we have a Cape Town zone currently operating, and the Saboa that I presented, there's also a Pretoria zone that is busy being implemented. And this is all part of the Nikki's offering in cloud. Very important, the support infrastructure. I will talk about it shortly again. It's all about on-site generator capacity and our data center cooling infrastructure. We do have currently a 1 megawatt generator on site, and it's always been part of the CHPC setup, but we've added a second 1 megawatt generator that is actually in use already. So I talk about being commissioned, and I say being commissioned because it's not that final connection is not done yet where we power our full cluster. I will say something about it shortly. The data center cooling, we need a chiller upgrade, and this process is busy happening. We do have 3 chillers at the CHPC that is very important to water cool the doors of the cluster, and they are very old. They were commissioned a long time ago, even before now. So there's a need to upgrade them as well. So this is all happening, and I hope it gives everybody just a brief future look on where we are going. So if there were any doubts about future investment on what the CHPC will be doing, I hope this gives you the answer. And it also shows the continued commitment from the DSI to make sure that this compute facility remains up and running and available for users. I already mentioned this to some degree, just to emphasize again, when we have CHPC employees supporting users, we do it in dedicated domains. We have a whole research group of people that support many domain areas. As I list some of them there, we've got a dedicated technical support team that makes sure that our infrastructure is maintained and upgraded and updated as required. We also have an advanced computer engineering laboratory. We refer to them as the ACE Lab, where testing of next generation systems and infrastructure and architectures and even, well, also cloud hosting and cloud setups, very much focused on software as well. So if anybody in this, say, users represented in this meeting today need some guidance or consultancy inputs in terms of what compute systems to use, and even if you think about, say, procuring your own in-house systems, we are most willing to assist through the efforts of this lab. And I just mentioned trainers again. We don't have full-time trainers at the CHPC. Typically, when we do training, it comes from all 3 of the above groups. People are also mandated to do training. So yeah, this is the current status. And I just before the meeting yesterday, I just looked at the breakdowns of the usage of the CHPC. And I think if you just focus on the graph for the moment, this is in the period. Sorry, can you still see it? Because I just lost it. Can I just check? Is there still? Can you still see the screen, Charles?
It's gone. I can see your screen, but it's in presenter mode, not full screen mode.
Let me just. I think there's something that just for the moment went wrong. I'm just going to stop sharing and share it again. It should fix the problem. Just hang on a moment.
That's back to full screen now.
Does it look right now?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe just to focus on the graph, you will see this is just the total usage of the Lingao compute cluster over the past year. I look specifically on 30 March 22 to 29 March yesterday, and you can see in the table there in the first line, we had 148 million hours we use on the cluster. And the breakdown is in the pie chart. So the academic institutions use about 80% of all compute hours on the cluster. You can see this is probably, well, this is what we expect to see. If this is a research facility, that is where the bulk of the users comes from. But you can see that the public sector usage, about 5% of the hours. Those African partner countries, about 14%. and then a very small percentage, about 1% of the private sector. So if I just go into and highlight those, you can see where we are meeting today, we are representing this fraction of users. So you can see it actually forms quite a small part of the total usage of the resources at CHPC. And it's always a sector, both of these sectors are, we look at it as sectors that we ideally would like to see growing. We believe that contributing to the research and innovation at both public and private sector is important for the country, and certainly from a DSI, our funder perspective, they would very much like to see this growing. But if you look at the table or the notes on the right-hand side, you will see, I do note there the active research programs for the past year, the total number about 301. Then I talk about the non-academic programs. This is the public and private sector users, so that's about 52 of 301 research programs are from the private and public sector. And if I look at the public sector on its own, the total number of hours used is about 8 million. That is why that 5% comes from. And what I put in the gray next to it was the previous year. I mean, I reported this slide last year as well, so you can see whether this now changes. And if anything else, there's a slight reduction in the total number of hours that's been used by the public sector. The number of research programs remain more or less the same. The unique entities represented by this is about 14. So you can certainly see that it stayed consistent. And from a CHPC perspective, this is good, but not ideal. This is the kind of things that we would like to see some growth. On the private sector side, you will see that the total number of hours used 0.9 million. So it's really small. So when we say 1% in the chart, actually 0.6%. So it's significantly less than 1%. And if you compare it to previous years, we're actually seeing less usage than in the previous year. The number of research programs are indicated there, also slightly less than the active programs in previous years. So I think it comes back to the discussion that we think is important in this meeting, is to see why we are not seeing more uptake, so that we will get to. I just highlight just who the users are. If you represent any of these entities, you can have a look at this graph. In terms of public sector users, this is the one listed here. The CSR itself is the core of this. There's a lot of work being done specifically on the climate modeling side that the CSR is using. But if you look at the others, South African Weather Service is quite prominent. MINTEC is prominent. South African Medical Research Council is quite prominent. So you can see the breakdowns also for the rest of the entities there. If you're from the private sector, these are the 18 entities that were active on CHPC in the past year. You will see that the user or the entity that used the most is Hatch, about almost 20% of all the computing. And then it goes down. QFinSoft, quite prominent this year. Was not active in the previous year, but quite active, started to use this year. Mambadi came through as a new user with quite significant usage. Gushi Consult for a number of 2 or 3 years now already. Aerotherm, a long-time user already, quite prominent. But you can also see then the rest. And I also indicate the typical discipline areas that are represented by these entities, and it is dominated by computational mechanics or CFD type applications. But we do have key bioinformatics support, and of course eScience over many years on their environmental focus on their work. So yeah, I hope that gives you a breakdown. And this is now the picture that I need to share. This is the top one. I'm just looking at the past 6 months on the utilization of the CHPC Lengao compute cluster. And you will see that in the beginning of the period, there is a period where the usage was around 80%, between 80 and 90%. That is when we talk about full capacity usage. We never reach 100% anymore because we are dealing with an old cluster. Some of the nodes are not available as when the cluster was commissioned. But the main problem is the 50% or so utilization that you see for most of the other periods. And this is due to our load shedding schedules, where the CHPC is not in a position to power up the whole cluster when we have load shedding schedules. And I'm emphasizing schedules because it doesn't mean we only shut it down when we have actual disruption in power. We actually have to keep it shut down as long as there is a schedule in place. And as you all know, this time here represents about 21 October, when the country was impacted by this load shedding schedule. And this is unfortunately the reality for CHPC. And that is why we need an additional on-site generator to power up our systems. And I'm pleased to say that that second generator is in place. It is just about making those final connections and setup of the cabling in the data center to power it up. So hopefully there's going to be an announcement soon where we can get back to full capacity usage. I just want to point out that period that you see where there's where it looks a bit more haphazard. That is where Stephanie was pointing to the South African Weather Service actually needing resources, and we had to kill some jobs for them to be able to run. So that was quite a hectic period for CHPC and a bit disruptive for users, including users in this community. But that is reflected in the usage. We are currently back to a situation where, at least when it comes to 50% of the usage, is fully used. The graph at the bottom shows a picture of the blue is the total number of running jobs at any given time. And the black is the number of queued jobs. So every time the black graph crosses the blue one, is higher than the blue one, it means there are jobs that are queued and users tend to have to wait longer for jobs. In the beginning, we had to adjust the queue settings so that it is more fair to users. So if we can lift the load shedding restriction on our cluster, these things will become much better and more convenient for users in terms of waiting times. You can see at the very moment there is a bit of an increase in the total number of queue jobs. But yeah, it is not good for us, or it's not nice to show these pictures, but this is the reality, and I think this is important for this community. I can just point out that when it comes to private sector users, we do use an express queue. So because that user community is so low, if you do submit jobs, if you use that queue, your jobs comes to the front of the queue, and you will get faster access to resources at times of oversubscription. Okay, so the last few slides I'm just going to run through quickly. This is just why do we offer specifically to private sector users this resource, and I think it's from our funders' perspective. The DSI recognizes that there's a need to do this, and we can even allocate up to 30% of our resources. So we are way below that in terms of what we can offer. So there is really opportunity if new entities also want to come on board. We do this by agreeing short-term agreements. This is non-profit for CHPC. There is some cost to this, but it's on a cost recovery pay-as-you-use basis. And the economic benefits, of course, why the DSI is doing this is that it's seen as a way to stimulate economic growth for the country as a whole by providing a public resource like this. We have significant HPC hardware resources to offer. I think people will attest today that we do have the in-house expertise to facilitate what we refer to as the modeling and simulation needs of this specific group of users. And we do this through a number of things, whether it's provisioning of and testing of software systems, expertise in open source tools, very much domain-specific expertise, doing all kinds of practical support. I list a number of things there that you can be assured you will get support if you use the CHPC. Things like offsite license communications, SSH tunnels, for that kind of thing, where you need to make use of commercial software. All of that is being catered for. And we do also try to advise the sector of users on the kind of strategies that you need to pursue to be optimal, and of course also being involved very much with our partners in the commercial software vendor space. We may make the argument that if you need access to HPC resources, you can see the CHPC very much as an operational expense, and it avoids the need for private sector entities necessarily to invest heavily in their own capital expenditure in HPC infrastructure. I mentioned this setup agreement stage. I'm not going to run through everything, but all I can say is that it's very quick. We have a very well streamlined process. If you knock on the door of the CHPC today, we can get you up and running in as quickly as a day. I'd say 2 to 3 days, but I mean, within a day, typically, if people are really urgently needing, we can have you set up and your accounts ready on the system to use. You allow where necessary free testing, so you can come and convince yourself that this is something that will work for you. I already mentioned the priority queue or an express queue for the private sector users, and continued dedicated one-on-one engagements to make sure that you get the support you need. Okay, so those are the commitments that we do. This last slide I'm not going to talk through. I just made a summary of all important links that if you really want to get any information on CHPC, we've got many things available online. The main website is the one in bold at the top, the users.chpc.ac.za. But if nothing else, you simply can keep the one in red at the bottom, the chpc.ac.za main website of the CHPC in mind, which will also link you to these sites. So yeah, that is where I'm going to end it. I hope I didn't take too much time, but maybe I can just ask if there's anybody that has a question at this stage. Maybe if there's something that piqued your interest. Quinn, I see you. Is your hand up, Quinn? Yes, you can continue.
Yeah, thanks, Werner. Yeah, just as always, thank you for doing a spectacular job through all sorts of incredibly tight constraints on the system. I think your team's really, really brilliant, as always. I just had a couple of questions. It was, I've sort of raised these before, but you know, you've got now the Derisa iROD storage coming online. You're also planning this archival storage. So I guess how is access going to work for existing users of CHPC, both from the academic point of view and the commercial point of view? I mean, will we have to sort of apply for separate accounts on those facilities, or will it all be integrated, or kind of how will it work?
So the one that is the closest to deployment is the iROD storage, and yes, at this stage you will still need a separate account for it. But maybe Charles, you can just give a brief summary on what is to be expected there.
Right. So when it comes to using iRODs, there are two ways of using it, and there are really two purposes for using it. iRODs is, for those who are not familiar with it, it's an object store, not a file system to be used for doing calculations. It's a place to put data where it's safe, and you can pull it down from there and reuse it again, and you can share it with others. The access to it is in two different ways. Most of the users will be using a web-based data deposit tool. So where you've got a relatively small amount of data that you want to put somewhere for safekeeping, and then for the purposes of publications, for example, you want to be able to share it with other researchers, you'd use the web-based data deposit tool, and you can use that also to associate metadata with your data objects, so that people know what they've got and what the history of it and everything is. But then when it comes to acting as a storage for large amounts of data that are closely related to work on the Glengar compute cluster, there you would transfer the larger amounts of data directly from the luster on the cluster through to iRODs using the data transfer node in the cluster, the DTN node, and use this with the iCommands set of tools that you use for managing and transferring this data. You apply for this through Derisa. Access for this is applied through Derisa, and that will give you access to the data deposit tool. And then if you require the connection from the cluster, then we can set that up separately for you. So it's not automatically available to all users, but you can apply to use it.
And I expect when the long-term archival storage comes, there will be similar kind of procedures, but that still needs to be determined. But we will make sure to communicate this quite well to CHPC users specifically, because I mean, we know that there are users that wants to use it.
Cool. No, thanks. I think that clears it up. And then just I had one last question was, at the moment, I think we're operating at a commercial usage cost of about 45 cents per CPU hour. Do you have much of a feel for if that's going to change, and if so, how it's going to change on the new machine when it comes in?
At this stage, it's difficult to say, although I don't expect it to be dramatically different. It will depend on what the total cost is, because that 45 cents is typically calculated on the total cost of procurement of the HPC system, but we also factor in the cost of operations over a time period, say looking into the future. and even things like, what does it say in terms of even salaries of people to support this? It's a total cost estimate of the CHPC that we then bring down to a core compute core level. But it's a very difficult thing to actually determine. But I don't expect it to be significantly different to going forward. Okay, are there any other questions just based on the presentation? If not, it's okay. Then we can do it in a bit more open discussion later. So then I would like to allow opportunity for some of our users that indicated some more presentations on their experiences and use of the CHPC. So this person I'm going to call up is Mopeli Kama from Mintech. Thank you very much, Mopeli. Mintech has been a long-term partner of the CHPC, so we are certainly looking forward to your feedback. You're welcome to proceed.
All right. As I've said before, I am a postdoc fellow at Mintech, and this is my first time attending this meeting. So I will be talking more on the reasons for choosing to use CHPC and the impact that HPC has had on my work. But first of all, I hope I won't bore you with some minor details on the technical details, because then that will inform as to why I chose to use CHPC. So I am working on the CFD reacting flow solvers for hydrogen reduction of several or various ores such as manganese and iron. And as you know that in the numerical simulations of these systems, the realistic numerical simulation require not only the accurate and detailed modeling of fluid dynamics, but also one needs some detailed characterization of chemical reactions, the physical and chemical properties of the gas mixture. And having said that, the reaction systems in this case, the reaction mechanisms involve the multi-step reactions, and one has to solve the mass balance for all the species involved in the reactions, and the reaction rate terms there have some non-linear and stiff, reaction terms, and then these add some computational expense to what one is doing. So that's the reason I have to use CHPC. And I must say that, in the reacting flow solvers, it's often the case that 80% of CPU time goes towards, numerical evaluation of the Jacobian matrices, which are used to evaluate some thermodynamic, properties and some formation rates, etc. So it's very important that one can calculate these rates as fast as possible, and there are some, techniques that are used to do that. So as I've said, these systems that we are working with are computationally demanding, and it wouldn't be possible to use my PC to run the simulations, hence our choice to use CHPC. And the open form solvers that we use scales, reasonably well, and this accelerates the process of getting some results. So CHPC has been really helpful in that regard. So currently we are working on some 2D axisymmetric, flow over like a single pellet of iron ore or manganese or whatever ore one chooses. And the computational demand in this case is not as high, but the bigger picture is to look at some industrial relevant applications, wherein in this case we'll be looking at a packed bed of iron ore or manganese or chrome pellets and flowing some gas through the pellets to pre-reduce or direct reduction And this will be beneficial to some iron and steel making industries and other industries that are now working towards decarbonization, because these technologies, as we have said, will really help in terms of the design and optimization of the either direct or reduction technologies. And as I've said, that now when we move towards the 3D and the macro scale approaches, now this will even be more computationally demanding, and CHPC will really help, as it has helped in our current work. Yeah, so I think basically mine was this short. So this is what we've been working on towards at Mintech. And yeah, we really want to thank CHPC, because then it really even helps us in terms of getting results on time and publishing some papers. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Mopeli. I think it gives us a very good indication of, say, specific projects of an individual at Mintech. And I think this just serves as a good example of the value that can be obtained. So thank you for your, well, I like to think of it as independent feedback and confirmation of what you see the benefits for at Mintech. I think Mintech has always been an interesting case, because you can talk about Mintech in a public, of course, a public entity as a council, but also as a private sector user, because certainly there's a private focus on the work as well. So Quinn, of course, you're also from Mintech. I'm not sure if you from your side also would like to just give a few brief comments maybe on experience. I know experiences in the past, but maybe more recent experiences from the Mintech side.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Werner. I think it's Mopedi summed up quite nicely some of the individual new project applications we're looking at. I think our field is extremely interesting at the moment. I think if you'd asked me 5 years ago what was going to happen with pyrometallurgy in the world, well, I would have said, nah, it's kind of a dead field. Everybody knows the technologies. We're just going to be copying and pasting plants for the next 50 years. But this whole push towards climate, mitigating of climate change and everything has really, thrown everything into a cocktail. I mean, now suddenly we have to decarbonize these industries. We have to look at alternative, chemical processing methods like the hydrogen reduction Mopedi is looking at. So it's really, we're suddenly under a huge amount of pressure to invent completely new processes out of nothing. And the computational tools are really the only way that we can at least do the initial assessment of the viability of these processes. So I think it's it's an extremely exciting time for us, and we're probably going to be needing CHPC and HPC in general more than ever. I think, as always, our problems are inherently massively multi-physics. You've heard from Mopedi that we've got these complex reacting flow problems, which are sort of gas solid phase chemistry, all sorts of crazy stuff going on. We've still got a lot of our arc modeling problems, our coupled magnetohydrodynamic problems. So inherently, the problems we look at are computationally intensive, even without looking at anything else. So I think we're always going to be needing HPC, and increasingly as we push into this sort of new era of almost reinventing the wheel using different spokes, I think we're going to be doing an awful lot of computational modeling, almost in a speculative, predictive manner. So yeah, it's exciting, and thank you for again offering the service you offer to us. It's really, really fantastic. So yeah, that's it from me.
Thank you, Quinn, and thank you, Mopeli. I think it gives even although brief, it gives everybody online a bit of a perspective on the Mintech. And yeah, from the CHPC side, we are pleased to have been involved in engaging with Mintech and supporting Mintech for really many years. And we also, it's not only about us delivering services, we also draw on the expertise and of people at Mintech like you, Quinn, to help us to improve the way we do things. So thank you for all the various kinds of inputs also from that perspective. Okay, so Charles, you have a comment?
Yes, if I may, I'd like to ask a question of Mopeli and Quinn. You're using quite a lot of words that I like, which, for example, your schizophrenic nature of being part public sector part, science council part, past commercial sector. But where it leads me is to ask, is Mapeli referred to basically the effectively transferring things or technology to industry to make things happen? And my question about that is, do you foresee any of that kind of level, computational level work actually going into industry? Because it's been one of our concerns here. If you remember back to the report I did 2 years ago about the private sector, where the private sector is actually doing very little, let's call it scientific computing. Do you see any of this technology transferring actually to the commercial operators for them to also further work on this? Or do you see that part sticking with Mintech and sort of, let's call it the dirty work going to physical work going to industry only, as it's been up to now, basically?
Yeah, so Charles, it's a very good point. And I think this is probably not unique to Mintech and the metallurgical industrial sector. I think it's probably, you're going to have this issue wherever there's sort of research interfacing with an industry, is that, the application of a lot of these modeling technologies is perceived, correctly or otherwise, as quite a sort of high-tech, researchy or kind of thing. So people would always rather, in industry, generally, people would always rather write a paycheck to someone else to do it. What we are seeing quite a lot of pickup, and I think that came through in Werner's slides actually, was a lot of the consultancy businesses. So these are the middleman guys between us and the industrial operations. So these are, they're essentially doing commercial consulting activities for the industry. They're starting to pick up commercial modeling programs quite a bit. So I saw on Werner's list, Hatch was at the top. I saw Ex-Mente in there somewhere, Multitech as well. So these are all consultancy businesses from our sector, and that's something new that I haven't really seen before. So I think it's probably going to be a stretch to say that the industrial end users will actually pick up this stuff. I think there's a lot of interest. There's a growing interest and appreciation for the value of it in the industry space, but they're probably unlikely to start doing the work directly themselves. What you will probably see is a lot of the middlemen, the sort of consultancy layers picking up a lot of that work, though.
Thanks, Gwen.
Yeah, thanks. I think this is an important discussion that we will pursue in this very session still. But yeah, let's move to the next presentation. So Christian from Aerotherm, thank you very much, Christian. I think you represent an interesting model and how the CHPC is benefiting your entity, and very much giving us a perspective on the computational fluid dynamics space. So over to you. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Werner. Appreciate it. As I said, I'm Christian. I'm from Aerotherm. We resell Siemens flagship CFD software called SimCenter StarCCM Plus. And I had a quick look at the list that Werner sent or shared on the 18 clients or the private sector clients, and 8 of those 18 is active StarCCM Plus users using our software to run on the CHPC. And this comes without no small feat just from Aerotherm side, which is also on that list, but also the availability of the hardware and to sell our software in conjunction with the CHPC. We enable our clients and our users to be able to solve on the CHPC quite readily, to the point where we don't sell the software at all without marketing and promoting the CHPC and encouraging people to actually go and solve on the CHPC. It's a strategy that me and Charles, that's now a few years ago, we talked about, and it's something that we've really driven quite extensively, to the point where we see a lot of our clients, previously they would have had quite large local license configurations to solve locally on quite a lot of cores, whereas now these days what we see is we try and encourage people to take fewer cores locally and take power on demand hours which is really a unique licensing scheme that we offer, where clients can make reliable use of the CHPC's hardware with this power on demand license, which is it's very competitively priced to the point where you can solve for an hour-long unlimited course, which really enables people, even like smaller guys. We have consultants that does ad hoc CFD work to the point where they will just buy these hours. They won't have anything else than these hours, power on demand hours, and you really need to know what you're doing to be able to drive the software on an hourly basis. But they manage and they use it, and when they start to run the simulations, they don't run them locally, they run it on a CHPC. And many of some of the people in the school and that they actually drive the software exactly like that. And some of the other clientele, they have yearly licenses, and then they also have this power on demand to go and solve on the CHPC. Now, when we take a look at where everything is heading with GPUs, and so we've done some GPU benchmarking on a cluster with the 4 V100 cards. Both Charles did a benchmark, and I also did some benchmarks. And the GPUs we really see as the future for CFD. They're actively porting more and more of the software physics to GPUs. Me and Charles actually had a session with the Siemens representative that gave us a bit more insight into the roadmap. And it's about 2 to 3 years from now, I would think that when we do a Q-sub to the cluster, it's going to be on GPUs. It's not going to be on CPUs anymore, which makes things different and interesting. Luckily, the software or the license, the power on demand license, is also active and valid to also solve on GPUs. So you're not constrained by that fact. And then taking a look at how we go ahead in the consultancy side of it. So when we have, say, a project, any sort of project that we do on Eratherm side. So those that you don't know, Eratherm is both like software reseller and then also very heavily on consulting services. So we have an extremely strong consulting service division where those projects get budgeted for with including CHPC hardware hours. We don't do any sort of project costing or budgeting without including it. Sometimes we don't need it at the end of the day, but at least we have that buffer and that safety net to go and solve on a CHPC. If anything takes more than a day typically to solve locally, so that's 24 hours, we would go and put it on a cluster. And we get extremely good scalability on a cluster, depending on what physics it is, but we generally only submit on 10 nodes because it's quite readily available. But we have pushed it quite far. 40 nodes is typically not our limit, but typically what we go for is 960 cores. But we have gone above that, and also our clients has also gone way beyond that. So yeah, so coming back to the GPUs, the 4 V100s was about 23 Lingao nodes, which is about 550 cores. The costing of that is quite interesting. Doing a rough calc, it's actually cheaper to use the GPU cluster, to use the CPU cluster, which is also interesting. It's something that we can perhaps talk about, is the costing comparison between using CPUs versus GPUs, if your simulation and the physics that you're solving is applicable to solve on GPUs. And then tongue-in-cheek, the elephant in the room is things are moving on the Siemens side to you're getting like hardware and software. It's what they call a credit. Now, when we take a look at commercial cloud platforms like AWS, Amazon Web Services, it's new hardware, but when you take a look at these credits, when you can go and solve StarCSM Plus, you can, from within the user environment or the graphic user environment of the software, you can actually launch the simulation to submit it to AWS and run on AWS. And that credit is both hardware and software. Now, it's currently not available in South Africa, actually for Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Asia specific. It's currently in North America, and it's North and South America. And the thing is, it's only for solving, so you can't have any interactive sessions. They, on the rollout of new versions, they keep it up to date, but I mean, on the date of release, I send Charles the links and he installs the latest version. So on release day, people can already start using that software or the latest version, which is not necessarily always the same with the Siemens because of the certification and everything that they need to go through. But the cost, it's about 2 times, so 1.7. It also scales. The more cores you use, it does scale differently. Whereas the CHPC has a flat rate, which makes also budgeting for us and also for our clients much easier, having just a flat rate. But yes, something like the SimCenter Cloud HPC credit that Siemens is offering is about, as I said, about 1.8 to 2 times more expensive than a CHPC. Then you also sit with latency issues. These data centers are not in South Africa. Currently, it will be in the US. So the traffic to upload and download and to access it. But it's a really interesting platform where Siemens is also offering their clients that takes on annual licenses. They're offering these credits free of charge with the yearly license. And so we will eventually go into the sort of scenario where people would like to test it out, but we will first test it out ourselves and see how things plan out and work out. Like we'll also be doing on CHPC testing, if there's new physics, if there's a lot of our clientele will have it's so broad. We have mechanical, civil engineers, process engineers, where we continuously go and test and run benchmark cases on the CHPC so that we can also instruct our users to say, okay, right, but if you're not solving a cluster, so and so many cores. This is what we suggest that you should do a Q subs also so many cores. And it depends if it's CFD or DEM, or and then CFD DEM coupled. So yes, we continuously run quite a lot of benchmarks. And then to close out, so why do we use the CHPC then? Well, I think first and foremost is the people that we work with. Charles, Werner. Because of them, we can enable our users to make use of HPC on quite a cost-effective way. And I'd like to thank you guys for your continuous support in that fashion, where we can, as Werner said, within a day, they recently had 2 new people sign up for the CHPC, and they were up and running within a day, which is actually quite amazing. And then secondly and lastly is the cost. Whereas as Africans, we're quite inclined for the costing of anything. And as soon as you say, okay, right, but you can go commercial cloud and you can get the latest and greatest hardware, there's also sorts of benefits. When people say, but what does it cost? And as soon as you say, no, it's more expensive, they're like, no, we don't want to do that. So the costing of the CHPC, and as Quinn asked Werner about the costing of the new Lingau cluster, or whatever it's going to be called, Lingau 2, will also factor into that. So not saying anything, but I mean, it does make our lives also much easier to send people your way because of the real cost benefit of solving on a CHPC. And yeah, we're all looking forward to the new cluster quite heavily, not just as an Aerotherm, but our community as a large. And then yeah, so that's it from my side. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Christian, for that overview. I think it gives a very specific view from Erithem, but you are touching on many aspects, I think, that will be important for people online to know, maybe even the longer term customers or clients, but also new people. And I like the way you provided the feedback on why you are benefiting. And I hope that others can also relate to this. I think the key thing that the CHPC is focusing on is on the way we can support, how we can assist, even if you need the one-on-one support that Christian also referred to. This is the kind of thing where we believe we are distinguishing ourselves from others. Certainly, we are not focused on cost. We are just providing it in a cost recovery way as well as we can. So it's very much the services. So thank you very much for that feedback. I'm not sure if there's any questions or comments from anybody to be made. As I said, I think when we think about Erithem, it is about it's not just a single entity using the facilities for their own use. I think there's a bit of a multifaceted approach where you also consult for others and doing work on behalf of others. So that is a bit more involved. Quinn?
Yeah, thanks, Christian. It's always interesting to hear all the new innovations you guys are working on, particularly with GPU and all of that. I think that's going to be impressive if we get good CFD happening on GPUs one of these days. I just had a question. You mentioned that it sounds like you're going towards a little bit of almost a software as a service kind of model. I mean, do you foresee almost it going all the way that way? So instead of users having to buy long-term licenses and things, we could sort of pay for an ad hoc usage of things like Star CCM just for one-off projects and things like that?
Yes, no, Quinn, thanks for your question. No, most definitely. We, for example, the power demand hours, that's that's ad hoc as you can get. You buy just a minimum of 50 hours and then you get access to the full version of the software and also be able to solve on the CHPCs. And so all of our smaller ad hoc consultants basically uses it. And then also the Sims in the Cloud HPC, that cloud credit that you get that you can solve on AWS, that you need to have a yearly license for it. So, and that's where you just refer to software as a service. So Siemens only sells now software as a service. They still have the perpetual and the maintenance models, but they phased that out quite a few years ago, where it's a subscription way of doing business, where it's software as a service, where you get additional service like cloud sharing, to call something into cloud, and then also these credits that you can use these credits to go and solve remotely. You don't get a lot of these credits, so you'll run out of the credits quite quickly, but it's an incentive that you do get it, and they are going to continuously add more and more as part of the service offerings, software as a service. As I said, currently it's only for solving, which is great. You can submit it and it will run there, but I can foresee things going towards where you can actively drive your entire CFD simulation purely in the cloud. So pre-processing, solving, and post-processing. It will become a thing where it will most likely be like that, where now pre and posting is still done locally, and then solving is done in the cloud. Quite similar to how we use the CHPC as well. Although we have done quite a lot of posting on the CHPC, opening up the Sunday and posting on the CHPC. So yeah.
Cool. No, thanks. That sounds really promising. We'll keep an eye on it.
Thank you. Any other questions at this stage for Christian? I think, Christian, the comments about GPU, we at CHPC, of course, take very seriously. I think when we think about GPU, it is a completely, well, how can I put it? It's a domain where we need to make sure that we are ready to offer our services properly to all users. I mean, certainly from an academic perspective, that is also the case. And that is why GPU procurement or refresh of our facilities is very much on the cards. The next cluster, the will be still a CPU-based HPC system, but yeah, we will add on the GPUs. Yeah, so thank you. I don't see any other hands, so I'm going to move on to Zaid Ibrahim from eScience. Zaid, you're welcome. eScience has been a user at CHPC for many years. In some cases, using a lot of resources. So always very interesting work. So Zaid, it's over to you.
Morning all, thank you for the opportunity to share our experiences. Unfortunately, I don't have a camera on the system that I'm using, so you'll just have to listen to what I have to say. So just to repeat, my name is Zaid Ibrahim, and I'm an Air Quality Officer representing eScience Associate. In my experience, we mainly use the CHPC resources for atmospheric dispersion modeling of emissions over Africa, with focus over Southern Africa, including Namibia, Botswana, and South Africa as our main country there. Initially, eScience approached CHPC to assist with the chemical dispersion research project on behalf of the Water Research Council. The aim of the project was to forecast atmospheric chemical dispersion and deposition. This was conducted using the WRF and WRF-Chem model suites to model about 10 years of acid deposition over the South African high-veld region, focusing mainly on the dispersion and deposition of acid in the high-veld priority areas. The project was the first instance of WRF-Chem being run in South Africa, particularly due to the lack of high-performance computing resources in the past, which CHPC, of course, has allowed us to now use HPC for our modeling systems. So firstly, we use CHPC mainly for the processing power. eScience's in-house servers have about 48 cores each, which are minuscule in comparison to CHPC's 33,000 core processors. As comparison, to run the WRF-Chem project would have taken 1 day in real time to run the equivalent for the modeling period. That's a ratio of 1 day to 1 modeling in real time. Therefore, in order for us to have done the initial 10 years, we would have taken 10 years with our in-house systems. After many hours of research and struggles of getting output from WRF-Chem, we were able to set up a running iteration of the model with the assistance of Charles and the team. And CHPC's processing power gave us the ability to run 1 year of equivalent model data within 1 day of real-time data. So our initial 10 years of modeling was complete in 10 days. This is mainly due to the vast cores and processes available on the HPC system. At this rate, due to the availability of more processing cores and the ability to run multiple models in parallel on the HPC system, whereas in-house we can only run 1 model at a time, which of course resulted in the 1-to-1 ratio that we got. And then secondly, cost-wise, using CHPC to run private projects is considerably cheaper than that of competitors such as Amazon, AWS, and Google, to my knowledge at the time. Also, in order to run on AWS and Google, we would have to set up the WRF modeling suite on their HPC systems, whereas with CHPC, it has already been set up. And then following on from the chem, we use the HPC system to run 50 years of modeling after our initial 10-year period for the project. This allowed us to run the 50 years of modeling to investigate the long-term impact of acid deposition on the Vaal catchment. At this stage, the research projects have been completed and wrapped up, and that is mainly due to the availability and computing powers of the HPC system. Currently, CHPC assists eScience with weather forecasting modeling, in which wind and solar data is primarily modeled over large regions of the country to determine and assess suitable locations for the establishment of renewable energy facilities. This is mainly to run wind and solar iterations and allow us to establish where the most viable locations would be to set up. Moving forward, eScience intends to utilize CHPC resources to assist with the running microscale meteorological models. The microscale meteorological models are finer resolution models of the WRF modeling. So after running WRF, then we select a domain within our WRF model to run the microscale to get a higher resolution of data. And this would require us to install and set up the ARW Post and CalMet modeling suites. And hopefully with Charles and the team, we'll be able to set this up at some point in the future. This will also allow us to speed up project delivery timeframes with many of our clients, which is always acceptable from the clients. This will mainly be for atmospheric dispersion on a finer scale within maybe 10 to 50 kilometer domains. The difficulties we encounter include connection stability. However, this has stabilized drastically with the recent development employed by CHPC, and we understand that most of the connection stability is due to load shedding impact. We'd like to take this time to thank CHPC. Well, overall, we are impressed with the services and capabilities of the CHPC team and the equipment and look forward to their continued support. We'd like to thank Charles and the technical team at CHPC for always being on hand to assist us with issues big and small. And we'd like to also thank Werner for his patience and continuously providing status updates that affect the HPC performance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zaid. I appreciate the words of appreciation, but particularly the examples that you can share with the team on how your access to the CHPC has improved your way of working, and even how you can then, I suppose, commit in delivering to your clients in future. Thank you very much. As I said, I always find this work interesting. I mean, and how you are focusing on your atmospheric analyses and so on. And I'm glad the CHPC can support this. Now, are there any questions specifically for Zaid? I think while you think, I mean, the reason why we are putting these or asking the users to present is to give everybody a bit of a feel on what people are experiencing or doing in their environments. And we are certainly, I mean, it's good to hear about good things, but we are also very much here to talk about things that are frustrating you and where you feel the CHPC can really do a better job to support you. And so we are very open for this, but hopefully the presentations give some idea of where we are. I'm not sure, are there any questions, any hands going up? I'm not seeing it at the moment. So let me check. I mean, we are at the stage in the program where we will open it up for a bit more general discussions. I have a few topics that I will highlight and maybe ask responses from. I also hope that there are some of the entities represented that were maybe stimulated by what you heard to also maybe give your perspectives a bit from your entities, even if you didn't upfront indicate you want to present anything. So you are most welcome if you want to give your perspective on how your usage has been, what you are struggling with. You're welcome to do it. But I want to check, are we taking a break? Is it necessary for a break? We've been going for more than an hour and a half now. Do people want to just take 10 minutes and go and grab a cup of tea? Or should I make a call on this? I'm not seeing any responses. What are you saying? I mean, I'm fine to do a break. Maybe let's do it. I'm not seeing any views in opposing this. So let's just take a quick break and we continue at 10 to 12. And you can just stay online like it is, and then I will present a few topics and maybe ask a few questions to a few representatives, and we continue from there. Is that okay? Thanks. Let's make it 11:50 to come back with your refreshment. Okay, thanks. Okay, I see we have come to 11:50. I hope everybody did stretch some legs and got something to drink, so we can proceed with the next part of this agenda, which actually doesn't have an agenda in itself, other than being a bit of an open discussion and maybe some responses from attendees. I was just thinking, I want to ask maybe one or two of the entities that's represented here to maybe just give us a bit of feedback as well. Maybe just more from asking from my side out of interest. And one of them is QFinsoft. Evan, I don't know whether you are ready, but I hope you are. I mean, I'm just mentioning it because QFinsoft was not very actively using the CHPC, say, a year or more ago, but in the past year, you have increased your uptake of usage significantly. I mean, so much so that you're almost, well, I think you're in the second place now of private sector entities using the CHPC. Are you in a position maybe to just give us some background of, has something changed, or is there maybe some focus area that suddenly became a bit more important? Are you okay to provide a bit of feedback, and maybe in general also on the model, on how you use, whether there's consultancy work, whether you do it for your own research, that kind of thing? Thanks, if okay.
Sure, I can give a little bit of an overview. Can you hear me?
Yes, no, I hear you perfectly well.
Okay.
Thanks.
The mic's on the right side. Yeah, so I think, internally to QFinsoft, we do have our own computing resources that we typically tend to use for consulting and support work for our clients. Just obviously because it's easier, quicker turnaround time, and to play around with a few things. But I think we found that over time, it's maybe not enough resources depending on the demand from clients, as well as from the client side. Models are getting bigger and bigger, so we do need to make use of other resources to, that we just can't handle in-house. So I think that's kind of the general trend that we've seen from our side in terms of our usage. I think Stefan's probably used it a lot more than I have in the last year. I know last year I did work on an FEA model that I can't remember the exact count now, but it was some ridiculous number of mesh cells, and it was just far too big for the machines that we had. So I made use of your system through actually the interactive window setup that we can actually run with the GUI and running the model that way. Charles was very nice to help set that up for me. So that certainly helped with that particular project, just because there's obviously resources that we didn't have available in-house. I think, Stefan, if you want to comment on, because I know you've been doing a lot of extra work.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Stefan.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, so just to add to Evan's comments, what we've seen is quite an increase in our transient consulting that we had to do. So obviously transient CFD simulations does take quite a long time to run, and that was mainly what was simulated on the CHPC. So like transients in orders of many minutes that we had to solve. So that is probably the bulk of the consulting or the simulation that we've done on the CHPC. In terms of future work, it depends on the consulting that we'll get in, but it is quite easy to use a CHPC and just to submit a job to that. The only limiting thing, as Evan mentioned, is like sometimes you want to monitor the run while it's running to see whether it's stable, or where you want to increase the time step, and that is still somewhat tricky. Obviously, if you have a GUI that can obviously help quite a bit. Yeah, for large transit simulation that nothing changes, it was very well, and I was very happy with the results that we got from that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I mean, it's just observation from my side, and it's good to see that you can, I'd like to think, spill over to the CHPC. I think this is at the core of, I think, the way we want to provide the resource is when you get to a point like Zahid has also indicated. I mean, you have your in-house systems, you can do a certain amount of work, but if you can really get the benefit, maybe due to the sheer size of what the model requires, or just doing more to come to CHPC. Thank you for that. I also want to ask, I think everybody will not know, but we also do have very, from a public sector user perspective, we do have long-term collaboration working with the South African Medical Research Council as well. Jessica, I'm not sure whether your sound was a bit shaky in the beginning. I'm not sure if it is back. I must admit I've not interacted with you directly, so you may be representing another unit from SAMRC. Are you okay to maybe just give us an indication your interest in CHPC? Can you hear me, Chris?
Hi. I'm sorry about that. Previously, we had load shedding.
No, it's good. It's very good now. Yeah.
Yeah, my connection is still a bit unstable, but so I am from the HIDRU, the HIV and other infectious disease research unit. So right now, we're doing a T-cell study. So we're going to be doing a lot of bioinformatic-based data processing. So that is what I will be using those resources for.
Okay, so you have not used at all yet. You almost see.
No, I have.
Okay.
I have started the process. Yes. So we're still working with the project right now, and so that will continue.
No, thank you very much. I think this is very important, and we are keen to support SAMRC with this. Maybe just for the interest to others. I mean, the other area that we do support quite heavily is on the African Genome Project. So there's a African Genome Center housed at SAMRC, looking at the unique genome, I suppose, attributes and opportunities on this continent. And there's a lot of work being done, and I know there's also big plans at SAMRC to expand on your genome sequencing infrastructure, and we expect just the sheer size in data that needs to be handled and the associated compute to significantly increase. So we are looking forward to that continued and increased service delivery to SAMRC. Don't know, Kreska, if you're involved in that component as well.
I am not currently involved in that, but I have heard of that research unit, and it's very interesting work that they are doing right now. So I'm glad that they are using those resources and things are going well.
Yeah, so no, we are looking forward to multiple projects from SAMRC, so you're most welcome. Yeah, thanks. So I'm just asked for this. Can I maybe ask for anybody that is joining this forum for the first time? I know there were a few new people here. Maybe, I mean, how you see this, have you heard enough? I suppose a single session is not necessarily giving you all the information you need, but is there anybody that's joining for the first time that maybe wants to comment on prospects of involving the CHPC in your work? It's completely open if anybody wants to comment. If not, then it's okay. So I have a general kind of questions that I would like to pose, and if anybody can give us a bit of a feedback or update or inputs, you're most welcome. One of the things that I mentioned right in the beginning is that we see, especially from private sector use, that we have extremely low take-up, and we have been grappling with this for quite a long time. I mean, we do have key users, and you see that it's probably the usage is remaining more or less consistent. It doesn't go really up and down, but it remains relatively low. And the question is why is this? Because we from a CHPC perspective, we believe that we do provide a proper service in terms of engaging with customer. Certainly from a cost perspective, it should be favorable. So the question can be posed in two ways. I mean, why are there not more entities taking up this opportunity? And secondly, if you're an existing user, why are things not scaling up significantly? Are there any comments on this? These are kind of a general question, but this is something that we as CHPC would like to understand a bit. Any comments on this? Yes, Gwen?
Yeah, Bernard, I can't really sort of speak to the main industry users. I mean, we sit more on the academic side, but sort of I know, you know, when when we sit at Mintech, we've got when we put our two different hats on, we've got our industrial/commercial hat and then our academic hat. And kind of when you're sitting there with your academic hat looking at a research project, you're almost not too worried about pushing the boundaries and using a heap of CPU hours and time, because you're pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Whereas the minute you're sort of sitting there with an industrial/commercial hat on, you're much more sensitive to sort of time of turnaround, quality and reliability of the results, and probably price as well. So I think those things tend to constrain dramatically how much we would use a facility like CHPC on say a commercial project versus a research project. When one tends to sort of be really kind of quite miserly with the CPU hours and only use absolutely what you need on the commercial end, whereas research tends to be a bit more open-ended and exploratory, and you chew up a lot more hours. So yeah, I don't know if that translates, but yeah, maybe that's just our perspective.
Yeah, I know that of course from a purely private sector capacity usage perspective, it is very much dependent on what projects you have to do. And I know that is very unpredictable. Sometimes you have a lot of work, and other times you may for months not need the CHPC, which we completely understand that as well. So I think that is also a factor playing into this. And anybody that wants to comment on that aspect is welcome. But Charles, I see your hand is up.
So Quinn, I'd like to throw that right back at you. So basically, what you're saying is research doesn't really work. It doesn't make sense.
What was that? Research doesn't?
Research doesn't really work. It's not worth doing.
Well, I think the point is
serious. I'm serious about this. If you've got a company doing something complicated, do you just carry on doing things as they've always been done, or do you try to do them better? And if we find that we're not getting any take up from commercial users, it means that people believe research doesn't work. Well, it's not worth doing.
Well, I don't know that I completely agree with that, Charles. I think essentially the point is the research burns up a lot more time on things like HPC, because we're exploring all the dead ends and trying things out and figuring out kind of what doesn't work. So research in a way is very inefficient in terms of the output it produces for a given number of, say, compute resources.
But basically you're saying exactly what I'm saying, is research is not worth doing.
No, I'm saying that if you don't do the research, then you don't end up with the with the nice slim streamlined tool at the end that the commercial user uses, but that uses far fewer resources to actually get their answer. But we can't get to that point unless we do the research, I suppose. So yeah, but I mean, it's sort of two different worlds almost.
But
it's exactly. Sorry, exactly. It is two different worlds. It's okay for an academic user to burn up 1 million hours, but it's not okay for a commercial user to use 10,000 hours to do something, which means that it comes down to the basic ideas that the commercial user does not believe that research is worth doing.
Yeah, yes. So in that sense, yes. Sorry, I think I understand what you're saying now. So you're saying the commercial user is not going to do research on the facility. Yes, that's correct. I think essentially what they increase, what we'd see in our industry typically is that they'll sit back and wait for us to spend 2 years playing around with something. And then when they see that the results are reliable and solid, then they'll pick it up and use it just like a tool, but they won't necessarily do the actual research on it themselves. That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is an interesting discussion. I see Christian's hand is up. So Christian, I suppose you're now going to explain to us why you're not using 10 times more of the CHPC than you're already using, because that will then answer the question, surely.
Yeah, no, I just want to jump in here and say, when we take a look at using the CHPC, not just us at Aerotherm, but a lot of our clients, we won't be able to do what we do without having access to your hardware. Typically, when we take a look at tackling really complex problems, not necessarily transient, but multi-physics, hybrid multi-phase, when we take a look at doing those, we won't be able to do that without having access to a cluster. So it's basically embracing the complexity, not being afraid to go more cells, more on the physics side, because we know we can go and solve it on a CHPC and get results within, say, 2 or 3 hours later. We have results, and we don't have to wait a week. The benchmarks that we've done in the past is 6 days becomes 1 hour, depending on how many cores you solve on, but typically we can go from 6 days to 1 hour. And to touch on the point with what Charles raised, if you take a look at the amount of CPU hours that the public sector has used compared to the private sector, if you were to tally up the private sector hours, I think you can probably tally up the top 5 or top 10, and it will only come up to maybe one of the private sector or public sector accounts in terms of CPU hours. I'm not sure if that equates to not having access to the cluster for research purposes compared to using it for purely commercial work. But yeah, it's an interesting tally to look up, but I think on the commercial side, or on the private sector side, it's about 100,000 hours on the private sector side is quite a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, I think this comes to the heart of the argument, and I think if you think back about the graph that I showed, indeed the privates, if you just look at academic usage, it is huge. Now, yeah, there's a lot more programs, so there's more interest to use the CHPC in the first place. But only registering a program is the first step. Then your actual usage of the facility is what we actually measure more. We focus more on this because this is where the hours are being tallied up. And yes, it is just way more hours that is being used on an academic programs, and it comes with, I suppose, a bit of freedom that you have more, so you can make the argument that are you using it productively, whereas in the private sector sense, you will not, even if you don't feel your cost for usage is not that high, you will still make sure that you use it for something that will have a very likely outcome of providing you with a result that you can use. So surely, Christian, that is part of the argument here. But even taking this into account, I think the argument from my side and Charles' side is the discrepancy is still so huge that there's something that we are struggling to understand.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I see Quinn has also said now in the comments, it's exactly like that. We commercial people, because we're using a commercial license and we build on the hourly fashion when you're using the software, it's you can't play around with it. And also doing Q subs, I frequently see our academic users when they do a Q sub, they just ask for the amount of ridiculous sort of resources. And whereas if you're on a commercial side, you really try and fine tune it, and that's where our benchmarks comes in to try and really educate our user base and say, great, but ask so many calls, not to just even get quicker into the queue, just definitely why we say ask for just a few resources or the sufficient amount that is required for good scalability. But yeah.
Thanks, Christian. Charles, the rebuttal.
Not really a rebuttal. As you know, this is my favorite hobby horse, but I'm going to keep riding it until it drops dead underneath me. Yeah, so Christian touched a word there that sets me going. We're talking about people playing with things, and that annoys me. Is research really play? You know, what is the private sector doing that it regards research just as playing around? It's something that students go and do. You know, that doesn't make sense to me. Are you going to try and do something better in business or not? But then when it comes to the students playing, this is now the next question I want to ask. What happens to these people? So Christian would know, because we have a common acquaintance who managed to burn through more than 4 million hours of Lingau time simulating very sophisticated train aerodynamics. So that's what happens at academic level. What happens with all those graduates? So we've got in all the different disciplines of science, at the CHPC, we've got hundreds of students playing. What are they doing when they start work? Do they now have to stop play and do serious, whatever it is that people do in real work? They've learned to be researchers, they've learned to use high tech, and now they're not using them anymore. Why is that? I mean, I'm not blaming anybody in this meeting because this is, I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but I want to understand it. Why is that happening?
Yeah, that is the question that we are trying to address. I'm not sure if that is a rhetorical question at the moment, but of course, if anybody wants to respond, you are welcome. It is just an observation. I think what Charles is showing is an observation, and what we also know from the past is that this observation seems to be relatively unique to South Africa. I mean, we've been looking at other countries and other entities, and it's always very difficult to compare because the only real comparisons that we can make is to first world countries where, say, the way that industries and private sectors operate and the way that HPC is taken up as a research tool is done, I suppose, fundamentally different to what we are doing. But still, I mean, in certain places, if you have a facility like ours, where you do offer a hybrid user base, where there's academia and private sector, and you offer the opportunity for industry to have a chunk of this that they can pay for, they will elbow each other to have this. You see, so it's more a case of keeping away the commercial users that will simply have the deep pockets to buy up the hours and use it, and where we see a bit of the opposite situation in South Africa. And I suppose it's not really talking about or speaking to HPC, but maybe just the state of industry and how innovation is being done and perceived in South Africa. So that is more like an observation that I can just share. But I would like, if there's nobody that wants to comment more on this, I would like this discussion to just become, for the moment, just a bit more practical to CHPC. And I want to ask the question, it is obvious to all of you that when it comes to the total capacity of, let's call it, hours that we could have offered to the complete community of CHPC, including this community, it has reduced significantly in the past year. I mean, it is just the load shedding has hit us hard. And I want to ask, are there specific, not only that, but also other things that you feel the CHPC is just not doing right? I mean, where you feel that, even if you would like to say specifically from a private sector user perspective, there's something more that we can do that you are becoming frustrated about a few things. I mean, we are very open to hear this, and you can voice it in this forum, especially if you feel there's others that should also hear it, or privately you can send it. But I mean, I'm trying, and you will know, Charles and all of us at CHPC, we are quite upfront in what the situation is at CHPC. Yes, there are prospects of getting brand new equipment, but yeah. Let me just get Evan.
I'll put my hands.
Evan to respond, and then you, Quinn. Thanks, Evan.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to comment on the previous topic.
Okay.
I'm so used to Zoom, so I don't know how to put up my hand here. I just think from our side, what we're seeing in terms of going on to this idea of research and whether commercial clients have this, doing research or not. And I think it's really a time thing. We find that a lot of our clients are really stressed for time, and they don't really have the spare capacity in their day to look at things that might be very interesting, but are not directly related to solving a particular problem at hand or developing a particular product. And you could argue that research is part of that. Obviously developing a product or service or something, there's some element of research and design. But I think maybe when you label it as research, I think a lot of commercial clients run away because they see it as this long process of development and study and things like that, where they need answers yesterday and they need to get on with it. So maybe it's not so much about, it's not that they don't want to do research, it's maybe that there's a time aspect to it, as well as maybe they shouldn't see it as research, but see it as some part of the natural development of what they're doing day to day. Maybe a lot of clients are doing research without realizing it. So maybe it's also just a rebranding question about that. And I think also just to throw in there, we find also a lot of our clients that are using HPC resources are typically doing that internally, because I think by the time you get to the point where you bought multiple licenses and you've invested in HPC, you invariably bought hardware to kind of to build on that, or to make those resources available to your people internally into the company. So maybe CHPC needs to be maybe a bit more better marketing as a resource for people out there in commercial areas, so that instead of clients building their own internal HPC systems, that they can rather use an external system that's existing, and that saves them that cost overhead. So maybe that's just some points and observations from my side.
No, certainly, I think we are quite aware at CHPC and that our awareness of the services is really not something that is so well known out there. I mean, I think there's definitely things that we can do in that front. But I want to come back to one of the comments you make about entities, especially in the private sector, doing their own investments, say in infrastructure, because the question to me is related to what we asked before this about, say, academic versus industry. How committed are entities to actually go and invest in their own infrastructure? I mean, yes, the CHPC may be there, maybe others, but that will also tell us how commitment, say, is from a management level of entities to do their own in-house modeling and simulation. I don't know if anybody wants to comment. Maybe the audience are not broad enough to get a full perspective on this, but I know, for example, you mentioned you do have in-house resources. How difficult is it to go and convince your management structure to say, well, we need to do this, and how susceptible are they? If there's anybody that wants to comment. Maybe I don't know from an
Yeah, just from our side, I mean, obviously we do simulation as our thing, so we're happy to invest when it makes sense. But from our clients, I think it's just, you get to those that will never need HPC resources, just for the scale of operations, and then others, I think when they get to the point of saying, okay, we need more resources, they invariably go big, and well, not go big, but they're big enough to invest in the hardware and the software side of it because they see the value that it adds. So I think it's about the company, let's call it company culture, in terms of how they see the value that simulation and computational power adds. And so I think by the time they get to that level, they're quite happy to invest. Yeah, just an observation.
No, thanks for that. Chris, I see your hand, but I just want to check. Quinn, did you have your hand up? I thought you wanted to make a comment still.
It was more on your second question, Werner, so I'll let this conversation run its course first. It's fine.
Okay. Christian, you first.
Yeah, get back to what Charles is saying, but who really has reasonable HPC resources? When I talk to people that maybe has 2 workstations that they connect to each other, it's not a match for the CHPC. Any person that we have put on a CHPC it's not like it's all right, it's fine. They're totally blown away. It comes back to we have 8 clients on that list. So, and coming to your research where academia is using it, we have had it, and it's a small community, but we have had it where people get employed that actually then has used the CHPC and then have to start using it for their work. So that has also helped them by saying that I am proficient with the CHPC because I use it for my master's or PhD. rarely undergrads use it, but they have access to it, but they rarely use it because of the type of work that they're doing. But yes, so we have had clients bridging that gap from academia to industry. So yeah.
Thanks for that. Yeah, this is a continuing discussion, and I think I think the point that Evan also made about making it a bit better known that the CHPC is there, Charles. I think this is a consistent message that we are getting. I see you're making a comment, Zaid. I've not had the opportunity to read it, but yeah, Gerard, if you want to comment on this topic, you're most welcome.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, I actually just want to reiterate what Evan said. So from our perspective, we've been using Azure mainly, so Microsoft Azure for the past year or so, and I've been familiar with the CHPC coming from academia, and transitioning into the private sector. I actually wasn't aware that you know, the CHPC is available to the private sector. So I think, yeah, just to reiterate what Evan said, so we ran into a situation where Azure and the cost of Azure is extremely high, considering the models that we run on GPUs and the demand for GPUs globally. So yeah, and then we started exploring other options, and going back to my experience with the CHPC in academia, I explored the option of using the CHPC, and then actually realized, you know, the CHPC is available to private sector. So I just wanted to, you know, comment and say that yeah, it's part of that awareness situation. So I think it might, yeah, because of, I think a lot of the private sector companies just by default, just instead of building their own in-house systems, they just, you know, consider using AWS, Google, or Microsoft Azure because that's just the go-to. But actually knowing that there's a local or yeah, a local HPC available is actually a better option for us in South Africa, considering latency issues and so on. So yeah, I think a little bit of marketing and that might help a lot. Yeah.
So I think again, I think you're emphasizing the point that there is a good opportunity, which we also believe it might just not be known well enough out there. Okay, just maybe to focus the discussion a bit on the more practical, immediate things. Koen, did you want to highlight what we are doing wrong?
Yeah, no. I think I was just going to say that, yeah, you know, I think the job that you guys have done in the face of load shedding is fairly commendable. I think most people would have just given up and shut the whole shop down. And obviously it is a reality. And I think, you know, the main thing that we would have wanted to see from the user community is that there's a bit of action to address it. And, you know, you've been very good at communicating that in terms of all the upgrades to the generators and all that. So, you know, all I can say is we feel your pain. It's hard to tell a commercial client, hey, sorry, we can't run our 5 megawatt furnace because South Africa doesn't have any electricity. It's kind of embarrassing. Yeah. So, yeah. So yeah, I think that, you know, the main thing is just keep communicating the way you're doing, and if it, you know, I think at the moment you're pretty on top of all the issues that would have come to mind. So I can't think of anything that's, you know, there obviously are issues related to the age of the system and luster and the load shedding background and all of that. But I think you know, you've been very good at communicating that, so we're happy that everything's on track to at least find a fix in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, thank you very much, Koen. I hope this is the sentiment shared by others. We remain committed to address any specific challenges you have, even if it's just technical, say, issues in getting to do what you want to do. We are very committed to address this. So you're most welcome. If you don't want to bring it up in this forum, of course, we are there. Also, the CHPC help desk is obviously the place to go. But I think it's a message I always give to all, also the academic users. If you feel sometimes a bit frustrated by how things are impacting us and how we are, yeah, especially on the load shedding front, you can multiply that by a few factors in terms of the frustration we feel. I think from a national hosting facility. I sometimes, I mean, we do feel the responsibility to make sure that this system is always optimally being provisioned to users, and that brings a challenge. And we are addressing, as I mentioned, especially on the power generation front, the project has taken much longer than we would have hoped, and there's no use really from me going into the reasons into this meeting. It is just, it did take longer, but we are reaching really now the end of it. I mean, currently I can confirm that everything that was carried by the old generator up until now is already being carried by the new generator. So it's more about the generator is fully running. It's more about just getting the synchronization set up in how different systems are fed from the generators that needs to be completed. So maybe just in short, what we are looking towards is that we have 2 generators feeding everything at the CHPC except the compute nodes of the main cluster. So that means any other service that we see has redundancy. That if one generator fails, even the GPU cluster, if one generator fails, the GPU cluster will not fail. The only thing that we cannot give this complete dual fed redundancy is the compute nodes. And that's why it will be split between the 2 generators. So if we currently have 19 racks, maybe say 10 racks on the new generator, 9 racks on the old generator. But from a user perspective, this should not be noticed. I mean, it means that if load shedding kicks in, the cluster is simply kept up. If in the real rare occasion that there's then a problem with the generator, half the racks may go down. But this is very rare. I mean, if I see how successfully we did manage to keep our old generator up and running over this past year or past period, that will be a rare occurrence. So that is just a bit more background. Okay, so I don't know if there's anybody else that wants to point out maybe any practical things that we need to look at, but if not, it is also okay, and we don't need to drag this session out much longer. This is the kind of thing that we're just looking at for inputs. Maybe I can just, as the end off, maybe look at maybe just focusing on a bit of a challenge that we had in organizing this session specifically. And Charles, you can also comment. Initially, I mean, the past 2 years we had virtual sessions. I mean, COVID just forced us to do it. And whereas virtual works nice, I mean, we don't have to be disrupted by traveling and so on. I mean, we're really looking forward to maybe some face-to-face engagements this year. And that's why the idea was to actually have a physical session, at least in Gauteng, and a physical session in the Western Cape. But we didn't really see the hands going up for this. Charles, do you want to comment more on this? I mean, Charles did quite a bit of a job to survey. Of course, the people on this line is not representative of everybody contacted. I think that the contact list of people is about 80 emails, so it is many more than on this. But Charles, some comments on your side?
Not really. We would have liked to see people face to face because there's a lot, especially one can talk about over lunch, that sort of thing. And I think we'll probably have another go at combining this with the annual conference, possibly in December, where we, you know, it's probably also a good marketing platform for letting the academic researchers know a little bit more about the availability of commercial work. But yes, I'd actually just like to agree with Werner. We didn't get a lot of enthusiasm about for a physical meeting, and anybody with suggestions on that, we'd love to hear why.
Yeah, I think maybe just to comment on the national conference. In the past, when we still had only physical conferences, we tended to have a let's call it this private public sector engagement session as part of the side program of the conference. Usually we have some workshop and tutorial kind of days, and we typically schedule a session like this. We are not 100% sure about the venue of the conference for this year. We are busy focusing on it. But I think what we will do this year is, if it is held in Gauteng or the Western Cape, at least, we will add a session to this, to the conference, so that we can see whether maybe linking it to the conference again will be a bit easier for people to join. Okay, but yeah, we don't have to talk much further about this. So I'm done from my side. I don't know if there's any more comments or topics that anybody would like to focus on. Any comments are welcome. you can put up your hand. We will continue with at least having an engagement like this once a year. I think it's good. Maybe some more regular interactions will also be good, but at least once a year. We are recording this session. I know there were a number of people, Charles, that indicated to you they would like to attend, but I mean, due to their schedules, they simply couldn't come at the time that it was set. And we tried to select the best possible time, but there are still others. So we are recording this, and I think one definite follow-up step was to at least provide a link to this recording to everybody, Charles, so that people can catch up. Yeah, so that is it from my side. Is there anybody else that wants to comment? If not, I thank you for this discussion. We always find it valuable, and well, I must say I enjoy this session with the sector of users. So thank you very much. Thank you also very much, Charles. I know you are very much directly involved in supporting many of the users, but also some of the arrangements going into this. And also thank you to the CHPC colleagues that joined this session. Any last word from your side, Charles?
Yes, please. You all heard me. If you don't want me to be grumpy, please use more hours.
Thanks, Charles. Okay, so that's it. Thank you very much to everybody making the time. I know everybody's got busy schedules, but we really appreciate the inputs and the participation. Keep well. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers.